Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, The ROI of Investing in Social Recognition Technology. This webcast is sponsored by Achievers. Employee recognition is one of the most important drivers of employee engagement. Today, the Achievers platform makes recognizing a daily habit and an integral part of company culture for global organizations. Join us at ACE 2018 in Toronto to hear what renowned experts have to say about employee engagement in the modern workplace. Check it out at www.achievers.com/ACE. And don't worry if you missed that link, I'll also post it in the chat area for you. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credit. You will receive an email from hr.com within 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. You may also log into hr.com and go to your View My Credits page where you can find all the credits you have received. If you have any questions today, make sure you type them into the questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will follow up with you. Now it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to our presenter today, Madeline Laurano of Aptitude Research Partners. Madeline, take it away.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am thrilled to be here to talk with you about how companies are building a business case for social recognition technology. We do a lot of research on HR technology, and I have to say that social recognition is probably one of my favorite areas to cover. And I think one reason recognition is so popular is it's something everyone can relate to. We've all had experiences at organizations where we have felt either highly recognized and appreciated, or where we didn't feel that way at all. We didn't feel like anyone noticed the hard work that we've been putting in, which can be really demoralizing within an organization. And it's not always clear why. It's not always clear why that happens. It's not something you can pick up on necessarily in the recruitment process. So the reason business leaders are so concerned with recognition is because it truly does drive engagement, retention, performance, and productivity. It impacts business results. We see that in the research that we do. We learn that when we talk to customers. This is not an area that is just a nice to have. It is a huge driver of business results. And I think not a lot of companies always recognize that. So although a lot of companies understand that engagement and recognition are so important, finding the right technology provider can be a challenge, as I'm sure many of you can relate to. Most HR leaders have a really hard time articulating what that value can be internally within the organization. So it can make it even more challenging when you're looking at different solutions out there. So the good news is we are here today, and this presentation is going to really focus on the value and the ROI of social recognition technology. And it's going to look at how you can think more strategically about the technology providers out there, and also how you can communicate that value internally to key stakeholders within your organization. So let's get started. I'm not going to bore you at all with an intro or any background here, but I just wanted to put a little bit of context to some of the data and the research that I'll be sharing today. We do a lot of surveys, so we do a lot of quantitative research where we look at trends in the market, how companies are investing in different technology and different technology providers. So I'll share with you some of those survey results. But we also do a lot of interviews. We're very strategic about interviewing companies, learning what challenges they face, what pressures they face internally, how they're thinking about different solutions. So a lot of the information that I'm going to be sharing with you today is that combination, the combination of the survey data and a lot of those anecdotes from organizations. So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're really going to look at 3 things. The first thing we're going to talk about is a closer look at recognition. What's happening today? Why is recognition becoming so important within organizations? Why are we so focused on engagement and the employee experience? Then we're going to talk about, as companies increase their investment in social recognition and technology providers, what is that ROI? How can you think about not only a solution that makes sense for HR, but a solution that makes sense for your business? And then finally, I'll provide some key recommendations that will hopefully leave you with some good talking points and make you feel really confident when you're looking at articulating this value internally at your own organizations. So a closer look at recognition. So it's really hard to talk about recognition without talking about the employee experience. We spend so much time focused on experience. We've been calling this the experience economy. And companies understand this impact of experience on their growth, on their profitability, and they're really making changes to how they communicate with, engage with, and support their customers. We live in a world, and we know this as consumers, where our experience as consumers is everything. We want a more personalized experience. We want to feel connected with a brand. We want to understand that what we want really matters as consumers. And for the most part, we can get those needs met. There are lots of examples of different companies. I often give the example of Stitch Fix as a consumer, that we understand that if anyone uses Stitch Fix, you get a really personalized shopping experience that doesn't cost a ton of money, but you feel that through this consumer experience, you have someone that understands what you need for your professional life or your personal life, and it's going to help you find the right clothes that you might need. And it's personal, and there's a dialogue, and it's really focused on the individual. So in fact, what we found too is that 60% of companies have an executive level customer experience role in place. That's how important the experience is in our consumer world. 60% of companies have that focus at executive level position. And what's happening on the flip side is we're not seeing the same thing when we think about engaging our employees. We don't have that same focus. We know it's important, but we're not always making that connection with business results. We're not putting the same emphasis on our employee experience. And we found with the same survey data that only 37% of companies have an executive level role for their internal employee experience for their workforce. So 60% for your customer experience and only 37% when you think about the employee experience. So what's happened is companies really aren't doing a good enough job with the employee experience. And you can see here from research that we did in 2016 compared to 2017. In 2016, companies we surveyed, 60% said that they had improved that experience. And just last year, that went down to 30% of companies were saying that they actually improved that experience. So we're seeing a decline in the employee experience. As we invest more in the consumer experience, we're seeing a decline in the employee experience. And there's a gap. There's a gap between how employers would talk about that experience and how employees would talk about it. And that's becoming very obvious. So companies really need to think about what will help to drive better engagement, to drive a better experience. And what we found in our research is recognition has the number one impact on that employee experience. When companies are able to motivate their employees, recognize their employees in a consistent, frequent, and meaningful way, they are able to improve that employee experience. So when you think about how important the employee experience is and how organizations are still struggling with it, one reason they're struggling is because they're facing new challenges today in the workforce. We're facing challenges with seeing an increased pressure from the business. Business leaders are focused on what's happening in HR, what's happening in talent management, and they're really starting to pay attention internally within their organization. And they want a better understanding of the strategies that are in place and the technology that's in place too. And for a lot of organizations, this requires reprioritizing some of these areas. What's important to our organization? How can we align our talent goals with our business goals? And for recognition, that's where recognition really takes high priority. It's something that can help improve retention, which is a business goal, something that can help improve productivity and performance. Another challenge companies are facing is the emergence of the gig economy. Companies recognize the benefits of a flexible workforce. Employees recognize it too. And we need to think about how are we recognizing not only our traditional workforce, but our gig economy as well, making sure that that experience is, again, frequent, consistent, and meaningful. And I'm going to say that several times throughout this presentation. Then new technology. There are so many new technology providers out there in the market. And while it can be really exciting to be in HR and know that you have so many new solutions that you could be looking at the same time, you really need to make sure you're investing in providers that are financially stable, that have the customer support that you need, and really are committed to this area. When we talk about technology and what makes technology great, we look at a positive experience, expertise in an area, and solutions that are going to be adopted within your workforce. And then the final challenge companies face is transparency. Employees want to know more about their employers, and employers want to know more about employees. This transparency has become an expectation, and we're seeing it come up more and more as companies think about how they're going to improve that experience, how they're going to provide a better engagement to their workforce. How can we manage it within this time of transparency? So given all of these challenges companies face, given that the employee experience seems to be struggling at a lot of companies, what's happening with social recognition? Well, companies are saying we need solutions, we need help. We're faced with a lot of pressure. We're faced with a lot of challenges that are new, that have not been within the realm of HR in the past, and we need all the support we can get. And they're looking at technology, and specifically they're looking at social recognition technology. We saw that over 50% of companies plan to increase their investment in social recognition this year, and we're going to really look at why that's happening and what you need to consider when you're evaluating different providers and, again, making that business case internally. So we're going to do our first poll here, and we're going to ask you what your top priorities are when you think about improving the employee experience.
So Madeline, the poll is now on the screen, so our participants are participating in it already. So we've got quite a few. I'm not sure if you can see this on your screen or not. So, I'll let you know when the voting starts winding down and when I'm going to close it.
Sounds wonderful, and I can already see responses coming in, and Excellent. It looks like we have a very good number here for employee recognition. You align so much with the survey results we do. I think we have a lot of very strategic HR leaders on this webinar today, which is fantastic. 41% say wellness, 41% diversity. So this is great. I think at this time we can
close. Yeah, I'm going to close this poll now, and I will just show the results on the screen so everybody can see the numbers that did come in.
Wonderful. Yes, so very strategic thinkers. Thank you all so much for participating. The results that we're seeing here align very much so with the research that we've done. 69% of you say that employee recognition is a priority for improving the employee experience. 42% say wellness. That's certainly been a big focus for a lot of organizations when you think about engaging your workforce, being able to think about how you can support your employees. 41% say diversity and inclusion, and then 20% say tuition reimbursement, and 27% say perks. What's so exciting to me about this is, having done this research for a long time, if we were to ask this poll 5-10 years ago, perks would typically be number one. And we see that a lot with companies. There's so much focus on free food in the cafeteria. Can we provide a pool table for our employees? Can we provide a basketball court out back? All of these perks that sound so great when you think about working somewhere. But the reality is what people want is a very human need. It's the need to be recognized for the hard work you're putting in. Employees any day would take that recognition over having free food, catered lunches, a basketball court in the office building. So yeah, you can see here that the results you shared align with what we're seeing too. 72% say employee recognition is having the greatest impact on that experience. And the reason that companies are increasing their investment in recognition and the technology that supports that is because when you do recognize your employees, people are more likely to stay with the company. They're more likely to feel recognized for their work. They're more likely to refer hires. So when you think about your employee referral programs and how important they are to your organization, this is certainly a way to boost them. And employees feel happy. They feel motivated. They want to be productive. They want to contribute to organizational goals. They want to refer people. They want to feel like they're part of something other than just their daily, day-to-day job. So it's an exciting time to think about social recognition, and it makes HR an exciting time to be part of what could be really transformative within an organization. So as companies think about implementing their strategies and think about this whole idea of the employee experience, leveraging social recognition technology really does bring proven results. We see it in our research, we see it in the interviews that we do with organizations. But as this demand for recognition increases, so does the confusion in the market with too many providers claiming that they're doing too many things. So identifying that true partner can really be a challenge for a lot of companies. You need to make sure that you have a provider with the strong product functionality that you're looking for, and at the same time, a strong customer service. And not every provider can provide both. So it can feel overwhelming when you're considering different solutions. What we really like to talk about is thinking about three things. You need a provider that has true expertise in social recognition. This is a provider that's been in the space for a while, understands what it takes to be able to recognize employees, has made a commitment to this area, not a provider that took some investment and realized this might be a nice area of HR tech to get involved in. This is a provider that truly has a commitment and expertise in this. A provider that provides a positive experience for employees. They've created a solution that is positive for your managers, for employees, for HR leaders within your organization. And then the final piece is adoption, making sure that the solution provider you're using and the solution you're using is one that people are actually going to use. And what amazes me about looking at these different solutions and some of the leaders out there in the market is the adoption rates for social recognition technology are double, triple, maybe even more other areas of HR technology. You're looking at over 90% of adoption rates in this area because these are solutions employees want to use. These are solutions that make them feel good. So when you think about what is social recognition, and that might be the first question you have right here. We understand recognition is important. We understand it is the number one way to improve the employee experience. But what are we really looking at when we look at technology? And the way that we define social recognition is a single platform that enables companies to recognize and validate behaviors and empower their employees to share their work. It provides unlimited access to non-monetary recognition and automates how points are awarded, distributed, and budgeted. Social recognition technology automates the way employees are recognized, encourages peer-to-peer recognition, celebrates sales incentives, years of service, and leverages data to strengthen the company culture and embrace shared victories. And you might be familiar with some of these areas. Certainly the peer-to-peer recognition certainly is boosted with an organization when they use social recognition technology. It's a great way to really enhance your years of service programs or your anniversary programs. But I think what might be surprising, and it was surprising to me when I first started studying this space, is the analytics and the data that can come from these solutions, where you're able to see the impact social recognition programs can have on the overall business. So when you think about evaluating social recognition technology, a few questions you want to consider. What is the ROI of investing in social recognition technology? Certainly key stakeholders at your organization, whether it's business leaders, whether it's procurement, if they're involved in your technology decisions or technology, whoever's involved, they're going to want to know what is the ROI of investing in social recognition. You're going to want to know what are the top challenges that social recognition technology can help solve. Is this just something that would feel nice for your organization, that would make employees feel good, or is this going to solve some serious issues within the organization? How is social recognition technology different from other areas of HR technology? Probably within your company, you're going to have key stakeholders that want to know, well, don't we already have an HRIS in place? Don't they do something like this? Don't we already have an onboarding new hire portal? Can't we just welcome people on board and be done with it? Can't we provide the mugs that we've been providing every year for anniversaries? But they're going to want to know what this social recognition technology does differently, what it does better. And then how can you show the value of social recognition technology, and how can you communicate that value to various key stakeholders? So we're going to go through each one of these questions in a little bit more detail. So let's talk about the business impact of social recognition. So when we looked at, from our analysis of social recognition, we looked at the impact under three areas. We looked at the business impact, the talent impact, how it's impacting your talent management initiatives, and then the cost benefits to your organization. So we'll spend a little bit of time focused on the business impact here. When employees feel recognized, they're more likely to contribute to organizational success. I think we all know that, and it certainly makes sense. When you feel good, you want to be part of the success of your organization. They feel appreciated by their employer, by their manager, they feel appreciated by their peers, and they feel motivated to contribute, not only to their own work goals, but to the company goals as well. They want to promote the brand, not just their daily responsibilities. So while some companies are really able to articulate the impact of recognition on the employee experience, this impact that we found is it extends far beyond just our talent initiatives. It really extends to business priorities. And you can see companies that are investing in social recognition technology were 4 times more likely to improve stock prices, 2 times more likely to improve NPS scores, and 2 times more likely to improve individual performance. The point that I want to make here is that these are business results. This is something that your business leaders care about, not something that HR has cared about in the past. It's something that business leaders care about. They want to know what the impact is going to be, and they want to know how it's going to improve what they're focused on. And when you can see this, and there certainly have been studies that have shown that companies that are rated best places to work are more likely to be those companies that have improved stock prices. So there's a strong correlation between how employees are being recognized, what that employee experience feels like, and how a company is able to perform. And you can see here when we looked at what is the impact not only to the overall business, but also to some of these talent initiatives we have. You can see an improvement in employee productivity. Employees want to be able to perform. They want to accomplish their goals. They feel really great about the places that they work for. They want to stay with their employers. They want to think about retention. They want to feel more engaged with their managers. Managers want to feel more engaged with the company. It goes both ways. And employees feel more engaged with the organization they work for. We understand this as recognition, but when you have the right tools in place, when you have the right technology in place, it's amplified. You're really able to see this improvement. You're really able to see how productivity, retention, and engagement is improved. You're giving managers the tools they need to be able to recognize employees. It's not a skill that comes natural to all managers. They need to be able to have solutions to support them. You want to make sure that employees feel like they understand this company. They feel motivated to perform. They appreciate being recognized. It's such a basic need that so often goes unmet within organizations. So to really have a solution in place, make sure that all of these efforts you have in thinking about the employee experience come across as frequent, consistent, and meaningful. So what's the alternative? What's the alternative to not using social recognition? And I think when you think about the business case, this is a really important aspect. It's not just thinking about what is that impact to the business, what is the impact to talent. It's also thinking, what are your alternatives? And for a lot of companies, the alternative is either to do nothing or to keep the status quo, to continue to do what you've been doing. And recently I read through some recognition efforts from different companies and did some interviews. And a lot of companies, the recognition comes down to either just doing it once a year at an anniversary or celebrating it for some type of year of service program, or thinking about, maybe just around certain milestones. It's something that's not meaningful. It's something that typically happens just over email. It's something that isn't shared, doesn't make employees feel good. When you think about how much time somebody spends in an office, this is where they need to feel good. This translates into other aspects of their lives. So if we're not putting the effort into that, we're certainly not going to be able to see that employees would want to stay with our organization. So thinking about what the alternatives are, if you're not using social recognition technology, it's either doing nothing or continuing with efforts that are either done in a very ad hoc way or really aren't tied to any broader organizational goals or efforts. So what we looked at here is how companies are finding budget for a lot of the social recognition efforts and how they're investing in social recognition. And what's interesting is it's not necessarily a new source. It's not a new budget. In many cases, companies are replacing ineffective or outdated solutions, or they're replacing nothing, with social recognition technology. Companies typically perform an internal needs analysis to look at what technology they're currently using, and they have to consider what value it's providing before they can make a change. So when investing in social recognition technology, sometimes you're replacing ineffective solutions you might have at your organization. That could include traditional engagement surveys that you might do once a year and maybe you don't do anything with the results. It might include very traditional rewards and recognition consultants that you've been using for years, third-party consultants. It might include antiquated performance systems, legacy rewards platforms, technology that most employees don't want to use. We don't like our performance management systems, and we don't necessarily like legacy rewards solutions as employees. So it's really thinking about what do we have in place that would fall under this engagement bucket, and what isn't effective. What are our employees not using? What do our managers not use? What isn't working, and how can we think about making a more strategic investment? And when you're having those conversations internally, when you're looking at how to communicate with key stakeholders, this is a really important piece. If you can come prepared to say, we know we're using 2 different engagement survey providers. We know we're using 4 different consultants for rewards and recognition that we haven't implemented any of the strategies they've suggested. We know that we're using 2 different performance management systems and people aren't even doing their annual performance reviews. We want something more effective. We want a solution that we know our employees are going to use, that we know is going to drive business outcomes. To come prepared with that information immediately gets you some visibility with senior leaders at your organization. So when we looked at and we talked to companies, who are some of these stakeholders that you need to think about communicating with? It typically is IT, HR, business unit leaders, compensation and benefits, and finance is very involved in a lot of these decisions, and procurement as well. So at this time, we're going to launch our second poll. And we're going to look at how you are measuring recognition efforts at your organization. How would you go about measuring if this recognition was effective? Because we've talked a little bit about why recognition is so important, why we need help with it, why we need technology providers to help us to be more effective, and why we need to think about communicating the value internally. But now we're going to talk about how would you measure it. So when you have stakeholders that say, okay, we understand it's important, we understand that there's certainly an impact to the business when you make an investment in social recognition technology, but how exactly should we be measuring and evaluating these solutions once we implement them? So we're looking at number of recognitions, frequency of recognitions, feedback from employees, engagement surveys, use of peer-to-peer recognition. We'll see most of you are saying the feedback from employees, which is great. High percentage for engagement surveys too. We'll give it a few more seconds and I think we'll be ready to share results. Thank you all so much for participating. Great, so you can see the responses here. And you can see that 41% said feedback from employees, 36% said engagement surveys, 9% number of recognitions, 8% frequency of those recognitions, and then 6% the use of peer-to-peer recognition. And when you compare that to some of the results we saw, again, a very strategic audience, so thank you so much. Feedback from employees, number one way to measure success of recognition. We saw a little bit higher on the usage of peer-to-peer recognition, And I think this is kind of a growing area, a maturing area, as companies think a little bit differently about recognition and how can technology help companies recognize employees. It's not just coming from managers. It's not just coming from leadership. When peers recognize each other, that can have a huge impact on employee morale. People feel, that they're recognized not just by their managers for milestones, but when they're recognized by people they respect, their friends, their coworkers. It's certainly very motivating. A number of recognitions, and again, in the frequency you can see here is, I'll make the point again, recognition is successful when it's frequent, consistent, and meaningful. When it's done once a year, when it's done in a very ad hoc way through just a single email that doesn't really make sense to share, it's not meaningful. Recognition is effective when it's frequent, it's consistent, and meaningful, and that comes through when you make an investment in technology. So let's talk about some key recommendations. So 1 in 2 companies say that analytics is the most important capability in a recognition provider. And I think I said that earlier when we started the presentation and when we looked at what the definition is of social recognition technology is the analytics. It is so important to make sure the provider you have is providing you analytics, giving you the insights on the number of recognitions, giving you the insights into managers and how they're interacting with employees. How are they and how often are they recognizing employees? How often are peers recognizing each other? How often are people using the technology? What does that adoption look like? And really making sure that you have the right analytics that you need, not only to be able to do your jobs and make sure that that employee experience is so positive, but also that you can communicate to business leaders those analytics to say, this is what our business cares about. Our business cares about retention. And we know the people that have stayed with our company for the past 5 years are the ones that have been recognized the most. That the people that have been the most productive, that have received the highest performance reviews, are those that have been recognized the most. Being able to see that data, to make those connections, to be able to say the way that people are recognizing each other is through mobile. It's through text. It's not coming from email. Really provides more of a powerful program. It makes sure that you're able to continue to not only improve your recognition, but reevaluate it when you need to. And I think what happens so often is we get stuck in routines and focus on what we've been doing and are afraid to evaluate and reevaluate. So we did a little bit of research recently where we interviewed a lot of companies and how often are they evaluating different areas of HR technology. And for most companies, especially when you ask their business leaders, they would say once a year. That's an appropriate time to reevaluate some of the strategies and technology you're using. HR sometimes would say once a quarter for different areas. But when it comes to recognition, it's constantly being evaluated, constantly looking at what's working, what's not working, what do we need to change, how do we make sure that employees feel connected to our company, and making sure that's happening in a consistent way. So this analytics is a really important capability to consider when you're looking at different providers out there in the market and making sure that it's given to you in a way and the dashboards are provided in a way that makes sense to you and are easy to translate and communicate with different stakeholders within your organization. So impact of social recognition. When we ask companies what happens when they do invest in social recognition, what does that impact have on their company? And you can see the retention of high performers, improved organizational performance, improved individual performance, increased employee loyalty, and sense of belonging. So again, just re-emphasizing this impact, not only of what recognition can have on the employee experience, but what the impact is of making an investment in social recognition technology on all of these efforts that are so important, again, not just to HR, but to your business leaders too, thinking about retention. And when we do interviews with companies, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at retention. They're looking at organizational performance and being able to make those correlations, which is amazing, because I think for a long time, a lot of companies had the misperception that social recognition was almost a fluff technology, something that just sounded nice, something that would be nice for employees to have if they could have it, not something that truly impacts the business. But we certainly are seeing a difference. One area that I think we'll see growing is to be able to enhance the employer brand. When we think about HR technology, we typically look at two sides of a fence. We look at pre-hire, everything that happens for recruitment. How are we attracting and recruiting candidates? And then we look at what's happening post-hire. When somebody's on board, how are they being developed? How are they being engaged? How are we retaining them? And we put kind of a divide between the two. But for a lot of companies that are thinking more strategically about social recognition, and certainly in the way that they're using social recognition providers, there is a strong improvement in the employer brand. If you're able to have a strong recognition program in place, if you're using a provider that is helping you to really elevate that program, you probably have a name for your program, you probably have been able to really make sure that it's consistent and frequent, that you're seeing more peer-to-peer recognition. It's becoming something that's really well known in the organization. Employees know it, they expect it. Your managers know it, they expect it. And when they're doing interviews with candidates, they're talking about it. When candidates are reaching out on LinkedIn to somebody that works at your organization to say, hey, I'm interested in a job at your company, but I don't really know much about it. What's it like to work there? Your employees are going to say, it's actually great. We have this program called, Great Work. I'm just making that up, but and it's great because we get recognized all the time. People say I do a good job, and then I'm able to share that with my family, and I'm able to share that with my peers, and I know that this is a place where I'm really appreciated, and they're going to tell that to candidates. So there's a really strong correlation that happens when you are recognizing your employees, and they're letting their friends know. They're letting people that might want to work for your company know this is a great place to work. And when you think about what companies are struggling with today and how there's a shrinking talent pool, but yet so many new job openings out there, finding talent is really a challenge. So to be able to think about social recognition not only as an engagement tool, but as a recruitment tool as well, also elevates that conversation when you're talking to key stakeholders to say, this is something that is going to help us not only retain employees, but it's going to help us recruit employees too. So we've talked about some of the challenges companies face with the employee experience, some of the challenges they face when thinking about recognition and how to better understand what this technology is, and also how this technology can impact our HR efforts and our business efforts. Let's talk a little bit about selecting a provider, because it's certainly an interesting market. It's becoming a little bit more of a crowded market than it has in the past. And I think there's a lot of confusion out there around how we should think about different technology providers and certainly what's important. And this is going to be an important conversation to have, especially when you're looking to build that business case internally. And the point before we kind of get into each one of these areas that I want to make again is how important it is to think about the experience, a provider that truly has a commitment to improving the experience for your employees, that is going to improve the experience for your managers, for your business leaders. This is why they're creating this solution. They have expertise in this area. Again, they didn't recognize this as a great opportunity to make some money and sell some software. They really understand how employees should be recognized. They really understand how to make that recognition more meaningful. They really have made a commitment that this is what they want to focus on, and this is the work that they want to do. And they've made that commitment in expertise. And then finally, adoption, that these are solutions that your employees are actually going to use. Because if you go through all the effort of building the business case, you get all the buy-in from the key stakeholders that you need to get buy-in from, and then these are solutions that are actually not being adopted within your organization, it's going to be really hard to get buy-in for the next thing that you need. It's going to be really hard to justify this investment. So you need to make sure the provider you're looking at is one that has proven adoption. Ask them for their adoption rates. Ask them for customers that are seeing an increase in adoption. Compare that adoption with other areas like engagement surveys and performance management systems and see what the difference is. So really looking at, again, experience, expertise, and adoption. So selecting a provider. So some of the different areas that you need to think about. The first is research. And this has changed a lot in how we used to think about evaluating providers, and certainly in HR, is there's a lot of research that you can do on your own, even before you start to engage with any providers. You can identify market leaders in social recognition. There's research reports out there. There are discussion groups, even on Facebook. I see discussion groups all the time about different areas of HR technology. There are conversations happening all the time about these different areas, and social recognition is one of them. And you should be able to really look at those conversations, be part of them, and identify who those market leaders are. Are these providers that have demonstrated financial viability? Are these providers that have a strong roadmap? Are these providers that have been in this space for a while? Are these providers that seem to be working with a lot of companies in different industries? They're not just working with tech companies. They're working with companies in a lot of different industries. And really think about who those market leaders are. There's a lot of ways to get this information that's out there where you don't need to necessarily invest in a consultant. You could find this information. And there's a lot of research out there that's available for free for you to download and learn a little bit more about the providers. Another way, and I think it's a great way to do your own research, is to talk to other companies. Talk to companies that you might know. Reach out to companies that you don't know. What I found is that HR professionals and HR executives love to share information. They love to collaborate. They love to talk about what their frustrations are, what providers they may have used, what their process looked like when they evaluated providers, how they were able to build that business case themselves when investing in technology. They love to share that information. It's a wonderful, wonderful industry to be part of, and we need to take advantage of that more. So the more that you can reach out, you can ask certain providers if they want to make introductions. You can find these companies at a lot of different conferences too, and in local events that might be in your region. HR.com is a great resource to have to be able to connect with different people. So we're really lucky to be in such a collaborative space, and I would certainly reach out to different companies and learn from their experience. And then figure out internally, do some work internally and find out what are your core requirements? What's important to your organization? Do you have a remote workforce? What will some requirements look like to be able to recognize remote workers when they're not necessarily sitting next to each other in the office all day long? What does it look like when you might have a lot of employees that are just on a mobile device? Do you need a mobile solution? Really thinking about how your employees will be using this, what requirements you might need, is really going to be very important. So this research part is an important one. I think we overlook it when we know we want to make an investment, when we know we want a certain area of technology. We tend to jump very quickly into just thinking about shortlisting and sending out RFPs. But take the time to do the research. Take the time to understand who those leaders are, what your requirements are internally, and also what change management you might need internally to be able to prepare for this. So, I think that it's an amazing industry to be part of, and it's an area within the business that does a fantastic job with understanding what's happening in the market. And so you have all of those resources available to you. And then the next area is really thinking about the RFP process. Some companies don't do RFPs anymore, but whether it's the request for proposals or whether it's just really being able to narrow down on those requirements, understanding what the core requirements are, your must-haves, what the nice-to-haves would be, and thinking about outlining what those requirements would be even for future priorities within your company. Being very clear about what your company needs, what's important to your organization, and sending that out to different providers you might be interested in. And get buy-in for that. Get buy-in from the different stakeholders. Involve them in that process. Understand what they might need. Involve managers. Understand what they might be looking for, what experiences they might have had at other organizations. And then the final stage there would be to shortlist and demo. think about providing a scorecard to compare responses from different providers, conduct demos from different providers, be prepared for negotiation if you need to, and really make sure that you feel confident that you're able to see everything that you need to see from these providers. I think it can be frustrating when you're engaged with a provider and you're considering them, and oftentimes they might not even show you a demonstration. You want to be able to see the solution. You want to be able to play around with it and make sure that it's something that's intuitive, something that you could use, something that your employees will want to use, and you want to feel comfortable you've seen everything that you need to see. So these are kind of the three stages. And again, the research, thinking about understanding your requirements, and then shortlisting or conducting demos. And then who are the key stakeholders you need to think about? And for each organization, it might be a little bit different. Your company might have procurement involved in a lot of these decisions. Comp and bens might be involved. You might be working in compensation and benefits yourselves. A lot of roles now, like we said earlier, with 30% focus on employee experience. That's an influence at organizations. Is talent acquisition involved? If social recognition could also be thought of as a way to improve the employer brand, does talent acquisition need to be considered as a stakeholder here? IT, finance, the CHRO. How can you think about what's important to each of these stakeholders? And the way that we go through this exercise, and I apologize, I know this is a lot of information to digest on one slide, but I think it's a way to think about this and break it down for you in a way that gives you the information you need to have those conversations. And it might be different for every organization, but it's thinking about who is your stakeholder. Is your stakeholder compensation and benefits, business leaders, IT, finance? What are their priorities? For HR leaders, the priorities could be ensuring that employees are being developed and are meeting performance expectations. For IT, it could be ensuring that solutions are integrated with core HR systems. For finance, it could be to make sure that this is all fitting in with the budget. Understanding what metrics align with those priorities. How are we going to show that this solution can provide information on employee performance, productivity, on compliance, on integration, on adoption, on cost savings? What do they need to consider? What's important to them? What will they be measuring when they make these decisions? How will they help to influence that? And understanding what the value is, understanding what the capabilities that can support each of these areas are. If you're able to break it down and say, this is what's important to this stakeholder, this is how we can measure success for them so they understand. This is how we can evaluate the providers so they understand the value, not only to the organization, but to their job as well. We're going to be able to make a very strong business case for this investment. And we're going to really have the talking points to be prepared to answer a lot of the tough questions that might come through from different stakeholders. So where to start? So we've covered a lot of information today. We talked about why it's so important to think about recognition, why companies are increasing their investment in social recognition technology, how companies are building a business case by showing the value, by having those conversations with key stakeholders, by being able to measure the success of their programs. And now, where should you think about starting? How can you kind of leave this presentation and think about what you might need to do at your organization to get the ball rolling here? And the first step is really evaluating your current processes. Where are you at today? We kind of started this presentation looking at the current state of recognition. I would encourage you to do the same thing at your organization. What's happening now? And it might require having some hard conversations to say, we actually aren't really recognizing people, or we don't really know how we're recognizing people. We don't know if our employees feel recognized. Look at exactly where you're at for your company. Look at what processes you have in place, what might need to change. Then find a champion. That could be someone within HR, someone in comp and bens, could be a manager that helps, that really can help be a champion for this effort. A lot of times what we found is for companies that are either doing a change management strategy or looking to build a business case for technology investment, they'll find a champion to support them even outside of HR. They'll find a champion that could be a manager that feels really strongly that employees need to be recognized better. It could be a C-level executive that really feels that this needs to be part of the company. I worked for an organization years ago that the head of sales. The head of sales was so adamant that recognition needed to be a part of the company. And she took it upon herself to really help to drive a social recognition program at the company and to make that part of the company culture. So the champion that you find, certainly can help support you in these efforts, but might come from outside of HR. Understand what your options are. So I think, it's important to, when you know you want to make an investment and you feel confident that you want to move forward with a certain type of technology, but it's really important to take a step back and to say, okay, if we weren't using this area of technology, what would our options be? Would your option be to have nothing? Would it be to use very outdated technology? And that's the first step when you're looking at your budgets too. And then communicate with key stakeholders. And again, I gave you one example of an exercise you can go through, but there, are other models too, where you can think about who are the stakeholders, what's important to them, how do they measure success, and what are the talking points you need to consider when you're having these conversations. And then put a plan together for measuring success. Once you've made this investment, it doesn't end there. You need to constantly make sure that you're seeing that experience, that expertise, and that adoption in the solutions that you're using. And with that, we'll turn it over to some Q&A.
All right, Madeline, we do have some questions that are coming in. And just a reminder to our attendees today, if you would like to ask Madeline a question, make sure you type it into the questions panel on your GoToWebinar control panel. And I'll read that out to Madeline today. But the first question, what misperceptions exist about social recognition?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of misperceptions about social recognition. I think the first one that I hear a lot, and I think a lot of companies think, is that it's sort of, and I mentioned this earlier, it's a fluff area. It's an area that would be nice to have to feel recognition, but not necessarily a must-have for your organization. So I think ensuring that the recognition is something that is, more than that, it's something that's driving actual business results, I think is one of the major misperceptions that exist around social recognition. And I think for a lot of companies too, they also think that is social recognition just the perks that we're used to? Is this just a provider that, gives out coffee mugs or can deal with a lot of the traditional ways that we've recognized employees, not understanding that this is a modern technology platform that's really intuitive to use and is a very different experience.
Great. Now, the next question was in regards to the social recognition investments. Was there any surprises, key stakeholders, anything that would surprise key stakeholders in regards to the social recognition investments?
Yeah, I think what's the most surprising is so often we think that it's a new budget area and we need to find new budget. This is a new investment, which can be difficult to make that case internally when you're thinking this is a new area of HR technology that we need to invest in. But oftentimes I think it's surprising when you look at what you're using that hasn't worked and you're able to replace a lot of these solutions. I think what happens too in organizations is they don't even realize that certain areas of the business might be using different engagement surveys that were not rolled out, throughout the entire enterprise, that are just rolled out for different business units. And, to be able to say, okay, we need to take a step back, look at everything we're using, what's not working. And actually we're not finding new budget. We're replacing what's not effective.
Great. The next question, how should companies communicate with their key stakeholders?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for some companies, it does depend, what the best communication method is. Is it, setting up meetings and doing that? For some companies, it could be focus groups. For some companies, it could be involving them in the selection process. For some companies, it's providing a report and saying, this is what's happening right now at our organization. This is the impact that a social recognition could have. And this is why we want to make the investment. And this is what we, believe will happen at our company if we do. So it doesn't hurt to have different channels to think about that communication. Having the meetings, setting up the focus groups, and also providing the reports. And some of the data, I think this presentation will be shared with everyone after. Use this data, provide this information on the impact to the business, on the impact to your talent initiatives, and be able to share that too.
Okay. I'm not actually seeing other questions at the moment, Madeline.
It's either a good thing or a bad thing. We'll pretend it's a good thing.
There is a question, a ballpark of costs for technology, but I think we'll touch that one offline as opposed to doing it, because it's really going to, I think it might vary with individuals. So I think that, Francis, I will ask for them to follow up with you offline. I don't see any other questions at this time, Madeline.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you so much to HR.com and Achievers for the opportunity to present. And good luck to everyone out there that's looking to improve your social recognition efforts. I think it's fantastic that this is an area you want to focus on. I think it's really strategic, and kudos to you for being interested in it.
Well, Madeline, I want to thank you so much for presenting this very informative webcast for us today. It's very much appreciated by us. So thank you so much for doing so today for us.
Thank you.
Now, just a reminder that this webcast will be available in HR.com archives for up to 7 days for our free members and without restrictions for those of you with the certification membership. Your webcast credits are stored in your HR.com account, and we will also be sending you out an email in the next couple of days that will include that information as well. And your feedback is very important to us, so please take a couple of moments to fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen once this room has closed. And again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Madeline, thank you. And I'd also like to thank Achievers for sponsoring today. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.